Thanks for joining us on this Thursday, October 10th. I'm Paris Schutz. Coming up in just a bit on Chicago Tonight, Cook County's proposed 2020 budget, the rising rate of heart disease, and a nun who likes to run. But first, earlier today I spoke with PBS NewsHour correspondent Lisa Desjardins about the flurry of news in the nation's capital today. We began with the arrest of two associates of President Donald Trump's private lawyer, Rudy Giuliani. I asked Desjardins who they are and how it plays into the impeachment.
The two men's names are Igor Fruman and Lev Parnas. We know from their own attorney's letter to Congress that these two men were working for Mr. Giuliani in connection with his work for President Trump. Those are the words of his attorney, the attorney for these two men. The indictment is extensive. It actually accuses them of several campaign finance and other related crimes that have to do in part with Ukraine. They are accused of taking money or soliciting money from Ukrainian oligarchs and then also trying to lobby American officials, including one unnamed in this indictment congressman, specifically lobbying to try and get the ambassador to Ukraine, the then ambassador to Ukraine, removed. She was, in fact, recalled to Washington later. They're also accused of other schemes in here, one including trying to establish a medical marijuana facility for one of their Ukrainian contacts. All in all, they're also accused of overfunding or donating to the Trump campaign and other campaigns in amounts that were illegal. In one point, Mr. Fruman is accused of misspelling his name on purpose so that he could donate $400,000 to a Trump-related campaign or PAC. And the key for Democrats here is these two men's association with Rudy Giuliani. Giuliani, we know, has been a point person on efforts to link Vice President Joe Biden to alleged corruption in Ukraine. News organizations that have looked into that have pointed out that his son was given a high salary there in Ukraine, but they have found that Vice President Biden at the time was calling for a prosecutor to be removed as part of greater U.S. policy. Anyway, this is quite complicated, but the point is that these two men were involved, it seems, in Rudy Giuliani's efforts to look into the Biden family in Ukraine. I think we'll learn more as we go along, but just shortly after the indictments came out, House Democrats did file their own subpoenas requiring these men to give them documents and also testify. They had asked them to do this before. Their lawyers had asked for more time. We're going to see how this plays out. It's not clear, but I think it's something we'll be hearing quite a lot about in the future.
So it's not clear whether they're actually going to comply. Also today, House Democrats subpoenaed Energy Secretary Rick Perry. What do they hope to learn from him?
This is in similar territory, also to do with Rudy Giuliani and these two men, and efforts to reach out to Ukrainian officials, in fact, over in the Biden theory, as well as over natural gas companies and efforts to work with natural gas companies in Ukraine. Now, Secretary Perry has said that, of course, he spoke to Ukrainian officials, that, of course, he was interested in energy rights and expanding energy connections for the United States. He said that's part of his job. But this subpoena is asking for a broad range of documents. Democrats are wondering if there was more to it and if Secretary Perry was involved in any sort of quid pro quo, pressuring Ukraine to investigate some of the president's political opponents in exchange for things that Ukraine wanted, like military aid. We should note, we don't know that Secretary Perry was involved in that, but it's something that Democrats are questioning.
Lisa, there's also a lot of unrest among Republicans over the Turkish campaign in northern Syria and the Kurds. In Illinois, downstate Congressman John Shimkus says he withdraws his support of President Trump over this. What are you hearing about the unrest on Capitol Hill?
That statement from Representative Shimkus really kind of was eye-popping. He said he was heartbroken over it. It has been a very difficult situation for Republicans on the Hill. In fact, I think more difficult in some ways than the news we've been getting on impeachment. To many Republicans on the Hill, they either truly believe or they can certainly say that they think impeachment is something that's political. But when it comes to the moves in Syria, they believe that real lives and even more long-term alliances for the United States are at stake, as well as a risk that this could actually increase the threat of terrorism from ISIS. So this is something that is not just a philosophical ideal for many Republicans, but it goes to the core of what they believe in terms of national defense. And they think the president is weakening it here. They also believe that many lives will be lost from Kurds who fought for the American alliance there. So this is a very difficult situation for Republicans. And to be honest, I do think it hurts the president as he's going into sort of greater impeachment debate to have some of his closest allies in Congress thinking that he is not making the strongest decisions as commander-in-chief. There are some Republicans who support this, Republicans who say it is time for us to pull the United States out as the world policeman, as they say. Rand Paul is an example of that from Kentucky. But they are in the vast minority right now in a more defense-driven Republican Party.
All right, Lisa Desjardins, thank you so much for making sense of all this for us.
My pleasure.
The city of Chicago may be facing an $838 million budget gap, but county government is in much better shape. That according to Cook County Board President Toni Preckwinkle. Today, Preckwinkle revealed her $6 billion budget, which she says will require no new taxes or major spending cuts. It has a modest deficit of about $18.7 million. But costs in the county's massive health system are expected to go up in future years. Here to talk about this and other issues facing the county is Cook County Board President Toni Preckwinkle. President Preckwinkle, welcome as always.
Good evening.
Good evening. So you're looking to eliminate as part of this budget more than 600 vacant positions in the Cook County health system. Will that impede the hospital's ability to take on charity care?
No. But first of all, let me make a correction, Paris. The budget doesn't have a deficit of $18.7 million. That was the gap we had to close. It's a balanced budget.
So you've balanced that gap.
We've balanced the budget. That was a gap that we identified last June in our preliminary budget. The budget we presented is balanced.
All right. So, but the health system says that this
And by the way, no existing taxes will be raised. So.
And the health system
and nobody
says
will be laid off.
The cuts to those vacant jobs could impede their ability to take on charity care.
No. When we projected the budget from last year, we said there would be 345,000 members of our Medicaid expansion program county care, 345,000. In fact, there are only about 318,000. So we anticipated adding positions so that we could accommodate those members, those additional members of our Medicaid expansion program county care. When we didn't reach that threshold, we didn't need to fill those positions to meet that need.
So there were fewer enrollees than you anticipated?
There were fewer enrollees than we anticipated, and as a result, there were vacancies that were not filled, and those vacancies were eliminated in this budget.
At the same time, the Inspector General and you have gone back and forth about his assessment that the health system is going to have past due expenses that are so big it might not be able to pay them. Where do you stand on that?
Well, we asked Deloitte to come in and do an external review of the finances of our healthcare system, and basically they came back and supported the healthcare system's position that the Inspector General was misguided in his view. We have some challenges in the healthcare system around uncompensated care, but they're not the challenges identified by the Inspector General.
Do you anticipate higher health costs in the coming years?
It's not higher health costs. The challenge we face is that fewer of our patients are covered by insurance than 3 or 4 years ago. When the Affordable Care Act was first implemented and we created County Care, our Medicaid expansion program, we saw a continual drop in the number of our patients who were uninsured because now they were eligible for Medicaid, this expanded Medicaid program. But what's happened in the last about 3 years is that there's been an increase in the number of uninsured patients that we serve. And there are several reasons for that. First of all, President Trump despises President Obama and has done everything he can to destroy his legacy, including chipping away at the Affordable Care Act. He doesn't have a majority in the House to repeal it, so they've been chipping away around the edges. They don't market the Affordable Care Act in the way that President Obama did, so people don't know about the options available to them, including Medicaid expansion participation.
So this is pushing more people to charity care, you're saying?
Right, well, because of his efforts to weaken the Affordable Care Act. And they also don't provide as much support. They used to people called navigators who help people enroll and re-enroll. So first, they aren't marketing it, and secondly, they're not providing the support they need to enroll people.
And when we say charity care, we should clarify that means people who cannot pay their health care costs, but the county is obligated to take on those patients.
Yeah, we have 2 categories of folks who don't pay. Those we identify right at the beginning that can't pay, and those whom we bill who can't pay. So we have uncompensated care of two kinds.
The county's also planning $240 million capital investment in a new Provident Health Center on the south side. Where will the funding and the staffing come for that?
Well, we build things with bond money, and we did a needs assessment of the south side and south suburbs and determined that there was a need for a public health facility there. It will be a 79-bed hospital and also provide ambulatory, that is outpatient care, primary care, and specialty care. It'll be just to the west of the existing Provident Hospital, and we hope to start it next year.
And you're anticipating a possible $110 million shortfall next year. How do you plan to address that?
Well, every year we've made hard choices and difficult decisions. And as a result, the deficit that we had to deal with, the gap that we had to deal with, has been pretty much steadily declining. And as I said, this year was $18.7 million, and we were able to close that gap without raising existing taxes. So we'll look carefully at our opportunities for efficiencies as we look towards next year's budget. But we got to get through this year first.
And one thing not part of this year is any marijuana revenue from legalized marijuana. Why is that?
Well, first of all, this is very complicated legislation, and we anticipate that there might be what they call a trailer bill, that is modifications in the veto session, which is coming up. That's the first thing. The second thing is we know that Senator Toy Hutchinson has now become the sort of marijuana czar for the state and has to establish rules and regulations for recreational use of marijuana, just as we developed use for medicinal marijuana, rules and regs for medicinal marijuana. So there's a lot of work to be done there. And furthermore, the state has said that local units of government can't collect taxes on marijuana until September. And it takes a couple months for the state to kind of reconcile all their accounts and then get the money to local units of government. So at the very best, we wouldn't be able to get any revenue until December. So we're just zeroing it out in this budget.
So it might be in the next budget. Ballpark, do you know how much money that the county would take in from marijuana revenue?
I have no idea.
And what about Chicago Casino? I mean, obviously there would have to be a Chicago Casino first.
There's no money in our budget for a Chicago casino.
Or from a Chicago casino?
From a Chicago casino.
How much, if they build one, how much
well,
could the county
in the first
give
place, even if they decided on a location, clearly there would be a period of time while they either build out or build, so it's several years off at the very best. And my understanding is the mayor intends to ask the legislature to modify the existing legislation to make it more financially attractive to an administrator of the casino.
Are you of the opinion that it should be built in the central business district or the Loop to attract tourists, or should it be built in a disadvantaged neighborhood?
I think that's for the city council and the mayor to decide.
All right, so also part of your budget, you are allocating 90 new positions in Chief Judge Tim Evans's court. What's the reason for that?
Well, as we've reduced the jail population and put more people out of the community on bond and electronic monitoring, they've also sometimes had conditions for their release. And that means we have to have pretrial services available to those individuals. So the chief judge is getting staff people to provide pretrial services to those who otherwise would be in detention and now out in the community, going to work, going to school, supporting themselves and their families.
You mentioned the jail population has come down from 10,000 or a little more at its peak to around 6,000 daily. Is the jail's budget correspondingly come down that much?
What's happened in the budget is that the amount that's spent on overtime has come down considerably as staffing needs have been reduced. And we're also reducing the jail campus. Last year we demolished 2 divisions in the jail. This year we'll demolish 2 more.
Have you and Mayor Lightfoot resolved your differences as to whether violent criminals are being let out on bond too soon?
We've had a couple discussions, and our staffs are continuing to address these concerns.
Do you still sort of differ with her opinion that there are too many violent criminals that are let out and then they re-offend?
Our position is that the jail population has been reduced significantly by allowing those people accused of nonviolent crimes to spend the time between their arrest and their appearance in bond court and their hearings and trial out in the community.
All right,
people
also
accused of nonviolent crimes. We've pursued bond court reform, bail reform, without impacting public safety.
And so you and the mayor continue to talk about this issue?
That's correct.
All right, so you're also adding staff in the assessor's office. There are a lot of folks in wealthier communities, specifically in the North Shore, are up in arms about higher assessments. Are you satisfied that the system put in place by Fritz Kagi is fairer in its assessments than the previous system?
Well, of course, I'm committed to fair assessments. The assessment process is the responsibility of the assessor. We provided him and the Board of Review with additional staff to deal with the appeals, because the appeals have been rising 10–15% a year over the last several years. So we've provided additional staff to handle the appeals that come in around the assessment process.
It would be ideal if the system could work such that you wouldn't need such a robust appeal process. It would just get it right the first time.
We hope that we're moving in that direction.
All right. Kim Fox, Cook County State's Attorney. How do you assess her performance right now?
I think she's done an excellent job, and I'm proud to support her.
So it goes with, she's gotten the Cook County Democratic, or the state Democratic Party. You're the head of the Cook County Democratic Party.
The Cook County Democratic Party has endorsed her. Yes, slated her, along with Mike Cabanargi, who's running for clerk of the court.
What would you say you're working well with Mayor Lightfoot on right now? You've had differences on some things. You have agreements on other things?
Well, there are a number of issues on which our staffs are working and will continue to work.
One of those issues is having the Metro South Shore line operate as a local commuter line with CTA level fares. Where is that right now?
Well, it's not just one line. It's the Metro Electric line, which is on the east side of the city and the county, and the Rock Island line, which is on the west. So the extension of the Dan Ryan, which has been proposed from 95th to 130th.
Is the red line.
Is the red line.
Right.
I'm sorry, it's the red line, not the Dan Ryan line.
Right,
but anyway,
right.
It's right in the middle. To the east is the Metro Electric, to the west is the Rock Island. What we've proposed to better serve the people of the south side of Chicago and our south suburbs is increases in trains, number of trains, and reductions in fares to the CTA level. So that people on the south side and the south suburbs would be better served by public transit and access to downtown.
And the mayor's concern was that it would take away commuters from the CTA. Would Cook County make up any kind of shortfall that causes?
We've made it clear in our negotiations with Metra and CTA and PACE that we're prepared to try to make them whole. And that's part of what the negotiation is about, so how much the county would put on the table to be sure that Metro Electric, the Rock Island, CTA and PACE are not financially harmed by this transit pilot program.
Do all of those service boards have to approve of this?
No, it's one at a time. That's one of the challenges we have in the region. Each of these is independent and siloed. We don't have a
and then there's an RTA over all of them.
We don't have a unified transit system. So we've been working the longest with Metra, and we're closest to agreement with them. We will proceed with an agreement with them. We'd like to have an agreement with CTA and PACE, too, that would allow people to transfer inexpensively or at no cost.
Cook County Board President Toni Preckwinkle, thank you as always for being here.
Thank you, Paris.
And there's more Chicago Tonight just ahead, so please stay with us.
This evening's presentation of Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by North Shore University Health System.
What does it mean to care for someone? To heal? At North Shore, we're driven to understand bodies on a molecular level. But to truly treat you, we need to listen to what you say and what you don't say. Only by understanding you, inside and out, can our team of specialists determine the best path of care for you. We call it the science of understanding, and that's healthcare for what's next.
Could a monster pension merger bring big savings to taxpayers? Brandis Friedman has that story and more of what's making news in Chicago Tonight. Brandis.
In Paris, Illinois has nearly 650 various pension funds for local firefighters and police officers. Governor J.B. Pritzker wants that number brought down to 2. That's at the recommendation of a task force out with a report today after 8 months of research. It says consolidation will lead to higher investment returns.
There's an old Will Rogers line that says that if you find yourself in a hole, the first thing you want to do is stop digging. Firefighters and police pension funds are foregoing nearly $1 million a day that could be securing their financial futures. Taxpayers are having to come up with nearly $1 million a day to make up for the underperformance of their local pension plans. It doesn't have to be this way.
Now, while the state firefighters union supports the plan, the Illinois Fraternal Order of Police does not. Chicago is not included. The city's pension funds are big enough that they don't have the same challenges as smaller downstate and suburban ones. Illinois lawmakers say the organization that gives the SAT and advanced placement tests to high schoolers may be selling student data to universities and scholarship providers in violation of state law. The 9 state lawmakers are calling on Attorney General Kwame Raoul to investigate the College Board. The group says during an Illinois Senate Judiciary hearing last May, one of the nonprofit's own representatives confirmed that the organization does distribute student data from the group's Student Search Service survey at a rate of 45 cents per name. It's since risen to 47 cents. The lawmakers say those sales violate 2 laws protecting student data and privacy. Rising temperatures and shifting weather patterns mean vulnerable populations of birds will lose more than half of the geographic area where they live in Illinois as they search for better conditions elsewhere. That's the word from a groundbreaking new report from the National Audubon Society showing that 2/3 of American birds are threatened with extinction from climate change. Today's report follows up on a report from last week showing that North America had lost nearly 1/3 of its birds. This report provides a zip code-based tool to help users understand the impacts on birds where they live, and there's more of this story on our website. As for the weather, a chance of showers and thunderstorms tonight with a low around 66, then more showers tomorrow with a high near 67. And now, Paris, back to you.
Brandis, thank you. Still to come on Chicago Tonight, reversing the trend of total heart disease-related deaths. A visit to community of mostly millennial nuns. One is training for the Chicago Marathon. And the director of that marathon is here to talk about how the race has evolved over the past few decades. Plus, a one-time tattoo artist creates paintings that explore mortality and his former profession. We learn more about what caused the death of monarch butterflies found along the lakefront, and what you think about a proposed ban on horse-drawn carriages in tonight's viewer feedback. But first to some of the top business headlines from today with Crane's Ann Dwyer.
Thanks, Paris. Commonwealth Edison is again enmeshed in a federal probe of corruption in Illinois politics. Cranes reports that the utility and its parent, Exelon, have received a grand jury subpoena requiring records of communications with Illinois State Senator Martin Sandoval, among others. Sandoval's offices and home recently were raided by federal investigators. For ComEd and Exelon, it's the second federal subpoena they've received in the past 3 months. A U.S. attorney's investigation focusing on Southwest Side Alderman Michael Zalewski's efforts to get lobbying work for ComEd has also resulted in a subpoena. Meanwhile, the downtown office market remains hot. Companies' voracious appetite for workspace has pushed vacancies in the downtown office market to the lowest mark in almost 3 years. A wave of corporate move-ins, led by Facebook, helped drop the share of empty office space downtown to 12.5% at the end of the third quarter. That's according to data from real estate services firm CBRE, and it's the lowest vacancy rate since the end of 2016. And finally, if flying cars seem like something out of the Jetsons to you, think again. Chicago-based aerospace giant Boeing announced today it will team up with the automotive manufacturer Porsche to begin developing flying cars that will run on battery power. The companies announced today that they're looking to start testing prototypes. They're also convening an international team to address regulatory hurdles, public perception, and infrastructure challenges. Porsche Consulting reckons electric flying cars could be a $32 billion industry by the year 2035. For Crane's Chicago Business and chicagobusiness.com, I'm Ann Dwyer. Back to you, Paris.
Thanks, Ann. I'll place my pre-order right now. And now to Brandis Friedman and an alarming trend in heart health. Brandis.
In Paris, there's sobering health news out. The total number of heart disease deaths are on the rise. And according to the study in the Journal of the American Medical Association, the statistics are even worse for Black Americans. Here to talk about the latest news is Dr. Vincent Buffalino, a cardiologist with Advocate Medical Group. Dr. Buffalino has also served on local and national advisory committees for the American Heart Association. Dr. Buffalino, welcome back to Chicago Tonight.
Thank you. Good evening.
So, total heart disease deaths on the rise. First, please define all that encompasses heart disease.
Well, heart disease, there's obviously some spectrum, but it's basically about blocked arteries having heart attacks. It's plugged up cholesterol filling those arteries that supply the heart. And so it's important from our standpoint to look at who's at risk. Why is there an uptick in deaths? Well, obesity is a rising problem in the country now. almost 40% of the country is overweight. Diabetes, a huge uptick in diabetes, and high blood pressure also on the rise. So although we've seen a downtrend over the last 2 decades, frankly, we had dropped the death rate by 30%. It's now kind of rounded and on the way back up because we're dealing with the lifestyle things that actually lead to heart attacks and heart disease.
The same lifestyle things that you just mentioned with regards to obesity, diabetes, those sort of.
Exactly.
Okay. So a few stats about heart disease. About 14% of people who have a heart attack will die from it. So heart attacks have an 86% survival rate for clarity. But for those who suffer cardiac arrest, the statistics are shocking. Only 3% of Chicago's cardiac arrest victims survive outside hospitals. Inside the hospital, only 24% survive cardiac arrest. So, Dr. Buffalino, why are these numbers so dismal?
Well, it's terrible because if you have a cardiac arrest, basically your heart stops. It goes so fast that it goes out of rhythm and stops. And we have a very narrow window of time. Every minute that goes by, 10% we will lose another 10%. So within 10 minutes, we lose the majority of those folks. And so that's the problem out on the street. If we look at the issues, is did they get responded to? Did somebody come and help? The recent studies have showed, though, that we have a huge uptick in CPR. Bystanders are actually doing CPR. 50% more just in the last 3 years are doing CPR. And so we're energized by that. We actually have 30-some thousand folks that were trained in CPR just in the city of Chicago. Urban areas are a challenge for us. Detroit, 0% survival. New York, 2%. Chicago, 2 to 3%. Just imagine having a heart attack on the 45th floor of Wacker and Randolph. Hard to get to them. And so to get our paramedics there within that narrow window of time, very tough. Unfortunately, we lose those folks quickly. Now, if you have chest pain and a warning and you come to the emergency room, we're really good there because we get you right up to the lab. We put a balloon and a stent in your artery, open it up, stop the heart attack, and actually 95% of those folks survive. So that's where we hope to get a chance, is get to people early. Once they go down, it complicates it. Our ability to save those folks is compromised for sure.
Now, we've just talked about the difference in survival rates between cardiac arrest and heart attack. Explain to our viewers, please, the difference between those two.
Well, cardiac arrest, the heart stopped. And so, like I said, we have very precious minutes to turn that around, shock the heart back in sync. These automatic defibrillators that are now populated everywhere are the way that we get them shocked back into sync again. Heart attack is artery closed, blocked, you're having chest pain, you're sweating, you're out of breath, and you come to the emergency room. We get a chance in that circumstance to intervene. We get a chance to stop it. We get a chance to interrupt that heart attack. Where cardiac arrest, unfortunately, we don't have the luxury of time.
So what can we do to improve these numbers? Should more people be getting screened? Should more people be learning CPR?
For sure, more people should learn CPR. The uptick in people trained so that if somebody goes down on the street, that people are comfortable to not just panic, but jump in, get in there and start doing CPR. And we've simplified CPR. So there's no more mouth to mouth. So it's simply put your hands on the chest, press hard and fast. And so that is the issue that we want to train as many people as we can. Also, we want to put these defibrillators in many locations. These are automatic, basically computer generated. We put the pads on the chest. It detects that the heart is in cardiac arrest and shocks the heart back in sync. And we have those all over. And there are many stories of saves. I was promoting these for the Heart Association, and I said, well, I better get after it. So I bought one for my kids' school, one for our church, and one for my trunk. Half a dozen years ago, one of my friends had a cardiac arrest in my living room one night. Fortunately, there was a couple CPR trained nurses there. It took me about 30 seconds to remember that I had a defibrillator, and my wife ran out, got it. We hooked him up, shocked him, and he was awake and talking before the paramedics got there. We got lucky. Timing was right. We were in the right place at the right time. So
several nurses and a cardiologist in the room for that patient.
Yes, he was fortunate to say my event happened in the right place, yes.
We're talking about bystanders and people jumping in to provide that CPR. 3 years ago, bystanders only helped 13% of the time. Now it's up to 24% of the time. What happened? What changed?
Well, we made CPR easier. We increased the number of training programs around the city so that it's easy for people to get training. We actually have a CPR anytime kit. So the Heart Association has a little kit that's less than $30, and it's a little mannequin that blows up, and in 20 minutes you can learn CPR at home. It's a great housewarming gift to give to your neighbors and say, learn CPR for the neighborhood. So those are the ways. And we use now telephonic CPR. So when you call 911, and if you don't know how to do CPR, the operator will talk you through the steps of doing CPR right on the spot. So we're increasing the number of people that are actually doing CPR, and that gives us a better chance to save more lives.
You mentioned the defibrillators. Should more of those be required in buildings?
We think they should be everywhere. They're going to be like fire extinguishers, in my opinion, that anywhere there's a fire extinguisher. There's a chance. Any chance you have of someone going down, you want to have a defibrillator. 6 months after my arrest at my home, the principal called me at the school and said the guys were playing night basketball in the gym. One of the guys went down, had a cardiac arrest. They took my box off the wall, shocked him, and he was alive with a new stent the next day. So it happens in lots and lots of places, and we think every high population, they're at Soldier Field, they're at Wrigley Field, they're at White Sox Park, they're at the big venues. So we think it's important for people to have access to these devices.
Dr. Vincent Buffalino, cardiologist at Advocate Medical Group, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And Paris is back with a story on a millennial nun running the Chicago Marathon right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Allstate. Allstate is investing in Chicago's youth. We believe good starts young. That's why we're helping our youth develop the skills they need to achieve success in life. Allstate is proud to empower the next generation of leaders.
This statistic probably won't surprise you. At least 77% of all nuns in the U.S. are over the age of 70. But one community of religious sisters in Chicago is bucking that trend. And one of those sisters brought a surprising talent to the community that helps support their work. Jay Shefsky recently paid them a visit.
Sometimes we just can't predict what life will throw at us. When Sister Stephanie Baliga started college, she never could have imagined that one day she'd be wearing a nun's habit and rushing to get ready for a neighborhood food pantry. Back then, her priority wasn't Jesus, it was running.
I started running when I was 9, and running became my life. It was how I defined myself and who I was.
At the University of Illinois, Stephanie was the 6th fastest freshman in the nation. She was training 5 hours a day. But as a sophomore, she fractured her foot and couldn't run for 12 weeks.
As soon as you had 5 hours of free time, you really start thinking about lots of things, which eventually led me to pray and led me to really ask God, who am I and what am I doing?
The answer, she heard, was clear. Dedicate your life completely to God.
I didn't even know what that meant. And I eventually figured out that that usually means you become a nun. All right, good morning!
Even now, it can be pretty tough to keep up with Sister Stephanie. That's especially true on Tuesday mornings. There's an open food pantry and breakfast for the neighborhood.
Good morning. Thank you, baby.
The religious community that Sister Stephanie joined almost 10 years ago is the Mission of Our Lady of the Angels in the West Humboldt Park neighborhood on the west side. Many people know Our Lady of the Angels for its tragic history. In 1958, a horrific fire tore through the school, killing 92 students and 3 nuns, and injuring many more. When Stephanie first visited here in 2010 as part of her own process of discernment, the mission was still pretty new. It was founded by Father Bob Lombardo, who had been recruited by Cardinal Francis George to create an urban mission in the buildings of this former parish.
Right now, this area has many, many non-Catholics living in it, and yet there are still people that have great need. As we like to say, we do what we do because we're Catholic, not because the people we serve are Catholic.
And the Our Lady of the Angels mission is drawing young people to religious life. 10 sisters and 1 religious brother have joined Father Bob. The average age is just 31. While the population of nuns in the U.S. is aging and shrinking quickly, the number of new nuns is growing.
In our world where a lot of times there's no truth, it's just kind of like everything's okay. A lot of women are attracted to a radical lifestyle where they give up everything for what they believe is true.
It's a tremendous blessing because they have incredible energy. The neighbors love it. I love it because I have a great team to work with. And we're able to help incredible numbers of people out here in one of the neediest areas of the United States.
When I think about nuns, I usually think about old ladies.
Yeah, they're pretty jazzy. They're nice. They're spunky.
And did you know Sister Stephanie, who was just out here, she was going to be an Olympic runner.
The way she run, I can believe it. That explains the energy, right? I'm like, how much coffee does that lady drink?
And Sister Stephanie is still running. But her goal isn't the Olympics, it's raising money for the mission. Each year, she trains a group of mission volunteers and supporters to run the Chicago Marathon.
So all the money that we raise for the 103 people that are running the Chicago Marathon are going to be used to help renovate Our Lady of Angels School to be our new community center for the neighborhood.
This is serious work you're doing, and yet, I mean, you seem to have a lot of fun.
Yeah, we have a great time here. It's a grand time. Yeah, no, my life is super fun. People ask me what I do for fun. I'm like, live my life. Like, I don't even know, I don't have an answer to that question. I don't really do free time. I don't really do like casual activities. I do life, and this is my life, and it's really fun. So, so that's what I got.
For Chicago Tonight, this is Jay Shefsky.
That's a great life attitude. You can find out more about the mission of Our Lady of the Angels and their Chicago Marathon team on our website. And now more on how exactly a Chicago Marathon operates and how it's changed in recent decades. This year, the race will welcome 45,000 participants and an estimated 1.7 million spectators who will cheer on the runners in neighborhoods across the city. So what is it about the Chicago Marathon that attracts people from all over the world and keeps them coming back? Joining us is Carrie Pinkowski, Executive Race Director of the Chicago Marathon. Welcome back to Chicago Tonight.
Thank you for having me on, Paris.
So this is a milestone for you. This is your 30th year running the Chicago, I'm not running the marathon,
Right.
but being in charge of the marathon.
Right, exactly, directing the marathon.
Directing the marathon. How has it changed since the time you first got here?
I think from when I first started to now, the race was really thought of as almost an extreme sport, and it's become a social phenomenon. Anyone that lives in the city or the suburbs in the area, you see hundreds of runners that are preparing for it. Obviously, the participation has grown over the years, and I think it's become more a part of someone that discovers running, something that they want to do.
We talked about 45,000 runners, $1.7 million spectators. Talk about what goes into the operation of this.
Well, I think at the base of this is that we transformed 26.2 miles of urban roadway into what is the Bank of America Chicago Marathon. So everything that goes into that, you think that we take traffic and the day-to-day operations of that and turn that into the marathon. So there's a lot of communication, a lot of outreach that goes into it, and partnerships. Obviously, people that play a role in this. We have 13,000 volunteers that'll be involved race weekend. So a lot of planning, a lot of outreach, a lot of communication.
And the route has been pretty consistent through the years. You start in Grant Park, you finish in Grant Park. What goes into the deciding what neighborhoods that the runners run through?
Well, we had a little bit of a change last year, but what we try to do is there's a balance there. We want to have our participants experience the neighborhoods, the architecture, everything that is.
We're looking at the north portion of the map right now.
There's a map of it, but it's a great visual and a great tour of the city. But also for us, it starts and finishes in Grant Park, which is a great venue. But it's also very accessible for our friends and family members, people with significant others that want to get around either public transportation on foot. They can cheer on their loved ones. So comparing it to Boston, which is a point-to-point, Hopkinton to Boston, we do a great tour of the city, but we start and finish in the same location. So it's accessible to friends, family members, loved ones, significant others.
What are some of the elite marathon runners that run these other races, Boston, New York? What do they tell you about how this compares to those races?
Well, I think, the fact that this is we've hosted 4 world records here in the history of the event. So it's a fast course. There's a tradition of some of the greatest athletes in the world that compete here. This Sunday we have Mo Farah, who's a 4-time Olympic gold medalist. He's our defending champion. We have the Boston champion, Lawrence Chirono. So we've got the Boston champion against the Chicago champion. A special year for us in our para wheelchair division. This will be the selection for the Olympic for the Olympic team. So the top finishers in the wheelchair division will go on and represent the United States in Tokyo. So there's races within a race. And then our charity program, we have over 11,000 runners that are raising money for over 160 charities. So 2018, we raised $22.8 million race morning. So there's a social, philanthropic, and economic piece to the.
And in terms of the speed, it's because the race is generally flat compared to New York, Boston.
Yeah, there's not a lot of hills in it.
Incline.
Not a lot of hills in it, and just the tradition going back to Joan Samuelson and Steve Jones and Khalid Kanucci. Athletes have done historic things for Paula Radcliffe. Bridget Kosgei, our defending champions, and on a great trajectory. I think we're going to see a great performance from her on Sunday.
And the weather is supposed to be pretty ideal, isn't it?
It's supposed to be nice. I mean, we're going to have some wind that we're keeping an eye on, but it'll be cool and dry, it looks like, so it'll be exciting.
All right, so it's been 6 years now since the Boston Marathon bombings. How did that change how you have to prepare for this event?
Well, I think, security has always been, starting with what we do when I talked about earlier about transforming the roadway. Obviously, a lot of people think sport in the general world, there's two different universes. And for us, we've always had a great relationship with the CPD, transparency on how we do things. But we just had to step up, our screening process. I mean, the marathon is like no other day and like every day. So security process, protocols are in place in response to Boston. Screening when you get in, clear plastic bag, ticketed to the finish line, all of those things, and just making sure that our volunteers and spectators, again, it's a very special day, but like every other day, be vigilant. And the CPD has been amazing in their support of the event.
All right, so we were both watching with great interest this last story of Sister Stephanie. Any other sort of real special stories of people that have been doing this for a long time that stand out to you?
We have 4 individuals that have run all 41 events, and they'll be towing the line on Sunday morning. So think about that, 41 years.
They've run every single Chicago Marathon.
Started and completed every single Chicago Marathon. So those guys are all Chicagoans. They're going to be going again for 42. We had a press function this morning, and they all said that they're looking to their 50th. That's what they're going to goal. So we got. I mean, they're amazing guys, the Iron Men of the marathon.
The Chicago and are they in their 60s?
Yeah,
70s?
Early 60s, and then up into their 70s. Yeah.
And they all know each other.
They all know each other. It's a yearly reunion.
Well, you mentioned the charitable arm. You're raising $22 million, or
yes.
People that raise money running in this. Talk about how that works.
Well, what we have is a selection process. We support 160 charities, and they create teams. They raise money. Some of the charities have a local focus, national and international focus. So it really illustrates the philanthropic element of the event. $22 million. Since 2002, we've raised over $200 million. So it's a big part of the event.
All right, so last minute tips here for spectators, observers, participants.
Go to our website, chicagomarathon.com. There's a lot of information about how to get around, what to do. First-time marathon runners, you want to make sure you stay within yourself, that you're conservative, you don't get caught up with all the excitement, and just take it all in and enjoy it.
Pace yourself.
Pace yourself, exactly, exactly.
Don't expend all the energy in the first couple miles.
Right, don't get caught up in all the excitement.
All right, Kerry Pinkowski, congratulations and good luck on Sunday.
Thank you, Paris. Thank you for having me on.
A one-time Chicago tattoo artist is back on the scene. He no longer inks people. He's an acclaimed painter now, sought after by collectors locally and abroad. And his new series of paintings features tattoo art. If you're younger than 60, George Klauba has tattoos older than you. Animal heads on human figures. Heavily tattooed bodies. A battle between angels and demons played out in acrylic paint.
Things are screaming inside of you to get out. It's a lot of inner thoughts, fears, feelings, wishes, whatever. And they start to bubble out into the surface, release them.
These are the latest works from an 81-year-old artist who thought that he was through with painting.
My wife died 3 years ago, and afterwards I just couldn't do any artwork. Like the brushes just fell out of my hand, the paint just made me sick, everything. It was probably about 2 years before I did anything. And things have been going good ever since with the painting.
George Klauba grew up in Marquette Park and joined the Navy out of St. Rita High School. In the 1970s, he worked in a tattoo parlor on Archer Avenue. He showed us a tattoo he got back in 1957.
It's pretty faded right now. It's just as much as I'm faded.
But it wasn't his first tattoo.
I grew up in the Southwest Side and hanging around with the guys. We had sort of like a little, if you want to say, a neighborhood gang. And I tattooed myself and I tattooed the other guys with the Shy Lads was the gang, you know, was the Chicago lads, you know, with a dagger in it. School and art classes too, I was always doing things with ships and sea from World War II and with skulls and things and snakes. I loved snakes. I used to hunt garter snakes as a kid and used to catch them.
While his painting career was on hiatus, his longtime gallery, the highly respected Ann Nathan Gallery, closed when the owner retired. Klaba found kindred spirits at a new space to show the latest series of drawings and paintings he calls Last Chance Tattoo. And he's gone back to using the name George Tattoo that he used back in his tattooing days. He's well aware that the recent work is filled with pain and mortification.
There's mortification in life, you know, put it that way. And that's what tattooing is life, you know. Being somebody like my age too, your feelings of mortality are a little bit different. That brings things a lot into my work. Like I say, I'm pretty heavy on doing skulls and thinking of death more and that too. And that's all a part of it, and it's a good part of it.
George has been a mentor to many, many artists, and I think to see him painting and producing this body of work, if that doesn't inspire other artists to do the same, I don't know what would, because this is a pretty remarkable body of work.
Just from the earlier times, people were impregnating their bodies with the soot or ink or blood or dirt or whatever to have spiritual symbols or something on their body that they would carry, and that it would give them strength, it would give them hope, it would give them love, everything. Tattooing goes bone deep, and it's what we are deep inside.
George Klaba, or George Tattoo as he's sometimes known, has a new show of work at the Hofheimer Gallery on North Damon. You can find out more and see additional artwork on our website. Well, this week a number of dead monarch butterflies were found along the lakefront, alarming some of the public. But our next guest says it's par for the course as the insects retreat south for the winter. Here to tell us more about monarch butterflies is Doug Tarrin, Chief Curator at the Chicago Academy of Sciences Peggy Notebart Nature Museum. Doug, good to see you again.
Good to see you.
So what's the deal? Why are there so many dead monarch butterflies showing up on the lakefront?
In part, it's because there were so many live monarch butterflies this year. This was a really big population of monarchs that we had here in Chicago this summer, which is really good news. And there's always a lot of attrition during migration. And so more monarchs, same percentage being not making it, you see more butterflies.
So you're saying it's good news, and why on the lakefront? Why is that where they're kind of congregating?
Yeah, a couple of things keep monarchs near the lakefront. Monarchs coming down this side of the lake through Wisconsin and south. The prevailing westerly winds kind of blow them towards the lake. They don't really want to cross the lake, so they kind of accumulate right along the lake shore.
So they like to stay, they like to kind of hug the coast, don't they?
They do.
But as I understand, some of them do cross the lake, and that's got to be a pretty tiring journey.
Yeah, that's the monarchs coming from further east, from Michigan. And most of them will follow the east shore of Lake Michigan down and go down around southern Indiana. But some of them
might get stuck in the wind and come across the lake?
Some of them will try to cross the lake, and some of them will make it across the lake. They're very strong flyers, but some of them won't.
And you were saying that you were seeing a lot of pictures, and some of the monarchs that people think are dead at beaches right now are actually alive.
Yeah, a lot of what people have been sending me, the monarchs are just kind of grounded. We had some abrupt cold, wet weather earlier in the week, and you could see that the monarchs were just sort of sitting on the beach, but clearly still alive. And that's probably why, if you go to the beaches now, you don't see many monarch corpses still littering the beaches.
All right, so you mentioned they're migrating, so they're heading where exactly?
They are going all the way to Mexico. They are going to some mountains about 100 miles almost due west of Mexico City called the Transvolcanic Belt.
Why do they all end up there?
Part of that is a big mystery. It's one of the reasons that it's still fun to study things like the monarch. Part of it is because it has, through the winter, fairly even cool temperatures. So they don't get frozen, but their metabolism is slowed.
How long does the migration journey take?
Generally, monarchs leave here around Labor Day and they get to Mexico around the 1st of November.
So it's a 2-month trek.
About a 2-month trek.
Is there sort of a monarch superhighway, like a similar route that they follow?
There is, and they tend to go some of the same places every year. There are places where the contours of the land kind of funnel them through the same areas. Places like Pelee Point on the north shore of Lake Erie. There are places they get more concentrated as they get further south. I saw something the other day. Apparently, they've shown up on weather radar in Oklahoma because there have been so many migrating through.
That's got to be a difficult journey for them. I mean, getting caught up in the wind and traveling that kind of distance.
It really is an amazing journey. It's you know, once they get there, if you go and see the monarchs on their roosting sites in Mexico, it's absolutely spectacular.
I know a lot of folks have gone down there and studied that and taken pictures. You mentioned the monarch population was greater this year in Chicago. What accounts for that?
Well, we know it was greater this year because we've got a program called the Illinois Butterfly Monitoring Network, where people are out on forest and nature preserves counting butterflies, including monarchs. And that's existed since the late 1980s. And this was the 4th highest number of monarchs that was recorded through that program over the course of the summer. Monarch numbers tend to bounce up and down a lot from year to year. It can be very difficult in any particular year to say what's caused it to be a good year.
Does climate change have any impact on their population?
I think the thing that I am most concerned about with climate change in the monarchs is how it's going to affect them on their wintering grounds. As weather becomes more erratic, they can have mass mortality events there when there's heavy rain, and they're up high enough there can even be snow up there.
You're saying in the spot in Mexico?
In the spot in Mexico,
And has the climate changed there pretty dramatically?
Some of the models are predicting it to get wetter there, and that could be bad for the monarchs.
Would they change where they're ending up?
Boy, that's anybody's guess.
Well, we just don't know why they. Are we talking about all the monarch butterfly population in the lower 48 here? They all wind up in that spot?
East of the Rocky Mountains.
East of the Rocky Mountains.
Most of them. There's some stuff in Florida and Texas that seems not to migrate, but everybody else east of the Rockies seems to go to these spots in Mexico.
And as I understand, you have some tips for people to help monarch butterflies. What are those?
2 things. Plant milkweed in your yard. That's the only plant that the caterpillars can feed on. And plant flowers like asters that bloom at about this time of year. Food supply for the adults during the southward migration appears to be very important.
And when are they going to be back?
They will be back here around Memorial Day.
So Labor Day to Memorial Day, they spend a proper summer here.
That's right.
All right, Doug Tarrin, thank you so much, as always.
You're quite welcome.
And up next, we'll hear your thoughts on the teachers' contract negotiations and a lot more. Before we go, some viewer feedback. Mayor Lori Lightfoot and Chicago Teachers Union President Jesse Sharkey separately joined us this week to talk about contract negotiations, and you weighed in. If fire and EMT employees get housing help, so too should teachers. The teacher pension is underfunded by over 50%. If you want to include housing subsidies in CTU contracts, then reductions in pension benefits or salaries should come with it. With all due respect to teachers, the only other union that sounds as entitled, out of touch, and arrogant is the police. This mayor needs to remember why she ran. She's turning into a reincarnation of Rahm. I disagree. She put a good deal on the table. CTU gave up most of their bargaining rights to Rahm. They need to take the deal. Prefer they all sit down together. Disappointing. And some of you shared your thoughts on the proposal that would ban horse-drawn carriages in Chicago. Yes, emphatically, they should be banned. The horses are overworked, emphatically again. I don't know how people support this type of animal cruelty. These horses do love to go out. For thousands of years, horses have been working animals. If there are bad owners, they need to be dealt with. That doesn't mean you need to ban the entire industry. You also shared your opinions on the Inspector General's report that found Chicago police officers used department-issued parking placards to park illegally at sporting events. So what? With what they have to put up with in this deranged culture today, they should have some perks. It's theft and it's an abuse of power, period. If they're not on duty, they should be paying for parking like everyone else. They are not above the law. Hard work for low pay and expected to work evenings, weekends, and be ready in case of a crisis or weather off duty. If this is your job prescription, you should be allowed some perks. Chicago PD constantly break all the laws they are supposed to be upholding. Disgusting. That, of course, the view of our viewers, all on all sides. They're not the viewers of Chicago Tonight, but the viewers that we so appreciate, watch, and send in their comments. So you can join us and join the discussion on Facebook and Twitter, or post your comments on our website. And that is our show for this Thursday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And please join us tomorrow night at 7 for the Week in Review. And now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Paris Schutz. I thank you for watching. Good night.
Closed captioning for this program is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, pleased to give back to the community through numerous charitable initiatives.